3 used wrappers hit the cold stainless steel of my workbench with a dry, pathetic rustle. Next to them, a cheap, neon-pink plastic hair clip shaped like a bunny landed with a hollow clack. This is a different case. Different people. Same rule. No drama. Just proof. I have 1 hour to change the locks before the first guest sees his face. I snapped off my latex detailing glove with a sharp crack. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the heavy wrench set. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a high-resolution photo, ensuring the Mercedes VIN plate was perfectly framed behind the used wrappers. Context wins cases. Jason always swore this vintage Mercedes was too precious to drive. An investment for our son, Leo's future. Turns out, it was just his motel. For weeks, the smart home app had been logging little glitches, door chimes at odd hours, cameras dropping offline for a minute, small items moved then found, where I'd already looked. Jason called it my imagination. I started saving screenshots. The sound of the garage door opening cut through the silence like a slammed door. I shoved the wrappers and the bunny clip into the deep pocket of my detailing apron, just as the side door swung open. Jason walked in first, wearing his tennis whites, grinning. Right behind him was Leo, my 26-year-old son, beaming as he held Jessica's hand. "Vicky, look who I ran into at the gate," Jason announced, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "The happy couple is early." Jessica giggled, looking like a porcelain doll. She stepped forward to hug me, right there between the Porsche and the Mercedes. "Hi, Mrs. Vance," she chirped. "I'm so nervous about the engagement announcement tonight." As she leaned in, the scent hit me like a physical blow. Cheap musk cologne. It was buried under layers of vanilla perfume, but it was unmistakable. It wasn't my son's scent. It was the same stench clinging to the warm leather behind me. The math solved itself. Pinned to the side of Jessica's messy bun was a neon-pink plastic hair clip, shaped like a bunny, the exact twin of the one digging into my pocket. The air in the garage went cold. It wasn't just an affair. My husband was sleeping with his son's fiancée. The woman Leo was about to propose to in front of our entire social circle before the first toast. I pulled back from the hug, my fingers brushing the sharp plastic edges in my pocket. I looked at Jason, whose eyes were darting nervously toward the ajar trunk. "You look lovely, Jessica." My voice was steady, deadly calm. "Though I think your hair clip is slipping." Jason froze, his eyes flicked to the trunk. "Why don't we go inside?" Jason stammered, ushering them toward the house. "I need a shower. I'm sweaty from the game." "Yes," I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You should definitely scrub hard, Jason." I stayed behind as the heavy door clicked shut. I didn't need a scene. I needed one move. I walked to the utility shelf and grabbed a thick, rough roll of padding. I didn't need to explain the details. I needed one simple outcome. Discomfort he couldn't confess in front of 200 donors. A hidden defect ends the deal. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Sometimes it's best served itchy. Upstairs, the shower ran. Jason thought he was scrubbing away the evidence. He didn't realize I had already set the tone for the night. I didn't leave bruises. I didn't leave fingerprints. I set a trap that would make him regret every confident step he took in public. Quiet, invisible, and impossible to explain. Then I washed my hands, closed the closet door, and went to find my son. I found Leo in the kitchen, nervously adjusting his tie in the reflection of the oven door. He looked so much like his father, but without the rot inside. He was rehearsing his speech. "Mom," he grinned, seeing me. "Do you think Jessica will like the ring? I'm doing it right after the welcome toast." My heart broke. But a fracture is better than a catastrophe. I couldn't let him walk blindly into a marriage with a woman who was currently fixing her hair after leaving his father's back seat. "Leo," I said, my voice low, "come with me to the study. Now." "Mom, the guests are arriving in 10 minutes. Now." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I unlocked my phone and opened the gallery. I placed it on the mahogany desk between us. The first photo. The wrappers and the bunny clip on the garage workbench. The second photo. The VIN plate context. The third photo, a zoomed-in shot of Jessica's hair from 10 minutes ago, showing the identical clip. "I found these in the Mercedes," I said simply. "Before you pledge your life to her, look at the timestamps." The color drained from Leo's face. He didn't scream. He stared at the screen, the silence stretching until it was suffocating. Then, the front doorbell rang. The first guest. Put the phone away, I commanded softly. We have a show to run. Do not let them see you bleed. Leo looked up, his eyes hard. The boy was gone. The man had arrived. He nodded once, slipping my phone into his jacket pocket. We walked out to the grand foyer just as Jason descended the stairs. He looked magnificent in his tuxedo. He smiled at the arriving donors, shaking hands, playing the perfect host. But then I saw it. A tight twitch of his hip. A quick shift of weight. The look of a man fighting an itch he couldn't publicly admit. By the time the champagne was poured, Jason's smile had turned brittle. Whatever was in that tuxedo lining had woken up under the heat, tiny, relentless irritation that punished every step. He tried to hide it. He pressed his thigh against the corner of the heavy oak bar. He adjusted his trousers once, then again, too hard, too obvious. Jessica stayed glued to his side, beaming, whispering something meant to sound sweet. Jason flinched away from her, his eyes wild. He couldn't focus. He looked like he was vibrating. And people noticed. A donor's wife paused mid-laugh. Someone leaned in to whisper behind a flute of Prosecco. Eyes tracked him the way they track a crack in fine china. Quiet, fascinated, waiting for it to break. "Darling," I walked up to him, my voice loud enough for the circle of guests to hear. "You look flushed. Are you developing a rash?" "I'm fine," Jason gritted out, his jaw clenched tight. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "Just the fabric. It's stiff." "Strange." I smiled, sipping my drink. "It's Italian silk. It usually breathes so well." The clock struck 8. The room went quiet. It was time for the speeches. It was time for the proposal. Jason was practically dancing in place now. He couldn't stand still. The agony must have been blinding. He looked desperate to run, to strip, to claw his own skin off. But 200 eyes were on him. Leo stepped up to the microphone. He didn't look at Jessica. He looked straight at his father. "My father always taught me that an investment needs a strong foundation," Leo said, his voice steady, amplified through the speakers. "He told me that tonight was about the future, about family." Leo pulled my phone from his pocket. He didn't propose. He didn't kneel. "But sometimes," Leo continued, "you find out the foundation is rotten before you even pour the concrete." Jason's eyes widened. He took a step forward to stop him, but the friction sent a fresh wave of stinging through his pants. He buckled, letting out a choked sound, grabbing the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. "I have an announcement," Leo said, looking at Jessica, who was freezing in confusion. "There will be no wedding. But there is a vacancy at a budget motel down the road. I hear they have great parking." Leo dropped the mic. The feedback screeched through the hall, but it wasn't as loud as the silence that followed. And that's when I signaled the security team I had hired an hour ago. The locks were already changed. Now it was time to take out the trash. The silence that followed Leo's announcement was heavier than the crystal chandelier hanging above us. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then, the feedback from the dropped microphone screeched through the speakers, snapping the trance. But Jason didn't collapse. He didn't flee. He did exactly what a narcissist does when cornered. He attacked. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jason roared, his voice cracking as he grabbed the mic stand for support. He forced a laugh, a loud, manic, terrifying sound. "My son, he's quite the comedian. Too much champagne before the toast, Leo?" Jason tried to stand tall, to project the image of the benevolent patriarch, but his body betrayed him. Whatever was in the tuxedo lining had fully taken hold. His body was sending alarms he couldn't ignore. One hand jerked toward his waistband, and his smile finally cracked. "Security," Jason bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at the 2 guards I had signaled. "Escort my son to his room. He's clearly having a public meltdown. He's not well." He was trying to flip the script. He was trying to paint Leo as the unreliable one, the drunk, the liar. It was a desperate move, but with 200 wealthy donors watching, confusion was his only last card. Jessica, realizing the tide was turning into a tsunami, tried to grab Leo's arm. "Leo, baby, please, you're scaring people. Let's just go upstairs and talk." Leo recoiled from her touch as if she were radioactive. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the neon pink bunny clip. He held it up, letting the stage lights catch the cheap plastic edges. "I'm not the one who left this in my father's car, Jessica," Leo said, his voice cutting through Jason's manic laughter. "And I'm not the one who smells like a budget motel." The crowd inhaled sharply. The mental breakdown narrative was crumbling. Jason let out a strangled yelp. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the discomfort was taking over. He dropped the mic stand and tugged at his waistband, unable to keep still in front of the city's elite. "Victoria!" he screamed, his eyes locking onto mine. The charm was gone. The mask had fallen, revealing the snarling animal beneath. "My skin, it's stinging. Something's wrong with this suit." I stepped forward, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I looked at the crowd, then at my husband, who was now tugging at his clothes in full view. "Jason, darling," I said, my voice dripping with faux concern, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You sound delirious. First you accuse our son, now you're accusing me? Perhaps it's the guilt eating you alive. Or maybe, just maybe, you're finally allergic to your own lies." "I am the owner of this house," Jason shrieked, looking wild. "I demand you kick these people out. I demand." He cut himself off with a guttural groan, dropping to one knee, breath ragged. "Actually," I whispered, leaning in close so only he could hear the tragedy sentence. "Check your phone, Jason. While you were busy losing your composure, my lawyer sent you a little notification. The deed to the house was under the company trust. The morality clause you violated just triggered an immediate asset freeze." Jason froze. The physical pain was momentarily eclipsed by the financial terror. "You can't," he wheezed. "Security," I addressed the guards, my voice shifting from ice to steel. "Mr. Vance seems to be suffering from a severe medical emergency. Please escort him to the front lawn so the fresh air can help him cool down, and take his guest with him." "No, you can't do this." Jason lunged at me, but the guards were faster. They grabbed him by the arms. As they dragged him backward, his heels skidding on the polished floor, he kept squirming, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man unraveling. Jessica stood alone in the center of the room. She looked at Leo, then at Jason being hauled away, then back at me. "Mrs. Vance, she stammered. "Save it, Jessica," I said, turning my back on her. "You better run. I think his ride is leaving." As the heavy doors slammed shut on the screaming couple, the room fell silent again. I smoothed my dress and turned to the stunned guests. The fight wasn't over. Jason would be back. He would sue. He would fight dirty. But tonight I had made the first move, and I had aimed for what he worshipped most. The morning sun hit the marble countertops of my kitchen, but it brought no warmth. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Leo was sitting at the island, staring into a black coffee, his eyes rimmed with red. We hadn't slept. We knew the gala was just the opening battle. The fallout was coming to our doorstep. At 8:15 a.m. it arrived with flashing lights at the gate and urgent voices outside. I didn't flinch. I took a slow sip of tea, smoothed my robe, and opened the front door before anyone could knock. 2 estate security leads stood there with a folder. Behind them was Jason, red-faced and overplaying concern. A welted rash still crept up his neck. Next to him stood Arthur Pendleton, the family lawyer, or rather, Jason's pit bull. "Mrs. Vance?" the older representative asked, hands clasped in front of him. "We received an urgent call regarding a private dispute and an allegation of deliberate tampering." "Tampering?" I blinked, the picture of confused innocence. "Sir, my husband hasn't lived here since last night. He left abruptly with his assistant." "She put something in my clothes," Jason screamed, lunging forward. He looked deranged. His skin was raw from hours of rubbing at irritated skin, and his eyes were red-rimmed. "Look at me. She tampered with my clothes. Something in there stung. She tried to ruin me." The representative looked at Jason, then at me. I stood there in my pristine robe, calm, collected, holding a porcelain teacup. Jason stood there foaming at the mouth, fidgeting uncontrollably, like he couldn't stop himself. Visuals are powerful. "Sir," I said softly, stepping aside to let them in. "My husband has been under tremendous stress. His business is failing, and he's been having episodes. I believe what you're seeing is a severe case of stress-induced shingles. He gets them when he's caught in a lie." "It's not shingles," Jason roared, tearing up his shirt to show his chest. It was a mess of red bumps and raw streaks. "Test the clothes. I kept the boxers. The lab will prove it." Arthur, the lawyer, stepped in smoothly. "Mrs. Vance, my client is alleging you caused deliberate harm. We are filing for an immediate temporary no-contact request against you. We want you vacated from the premises while the review is ongoing." This was their play. They wanted to kick me out of my own fortress. They wanted to seize control of the servers, the files, the evidence in the safe. I looked at Arthur. Then I looked at Jason, who was smirking through his pain. He thought he had me. He thought the law was a shield he could hide behind. You want to talk about evidence? I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a thick manila envelope. I hadn't just been drinking tea this morning. Sir, before you evict me, you might want to see why my husband is really panic-stricken. I slid the photos out. Not the ones of the affair. Those were for the public. These were for the estate staff. This, I pointed to a spreadsheet printout, is a record of withdrawals from our joint charity fund, $500,000, transferred to an offshore shell company in the Caymans. I looked at Jason. His smirk vanished. And this, I pulled out a photo of a construction invoice, shows that the shell company purchased a condo in the city center. The registered occupant? Jessica Miller. I heard him mention a few discrepancies. He smiled like it was nothing. Like the missing charity funds were just a typo, not the start of a public audit. Jason's grin faltered for a fraction of a second. The courtier mask slipped, replaced by a flash of fear. If my husband was itching, maybe he wasn't reacting to the fabric at all. Maybe he was reacting to accountability. This is a lie, Jason sputtered, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked at his lawyer. Arthur was staring at the documents, his face pale. He knew missing charitable funds turned a civil divorce into a headline-level mess. Mrs. Vance, the representative said, stepping between me and Jason. Is this authentic? My forensic accountant is on the way, I replied, but regarding the no-contact request, I think you'll find that I am the one who needs protection, from a man who steals from orphans to pay for his mistress. Jason lunged. You liar! I'll ruin you! Jason snapped. He turned, eyes wild, and tried to bolt for the side door, but the staff and event security moved fast. They blocked the exit and guided him back, firm and quiet, as the room filled with gasps and whispers. Jason's hands flew up, scratching at his arms. It looked like panic, not pain, and that made it worse. He leaned in close to Leo and hissed a threat right in front of an event security guard. His control was unraveling. This isn't over, Victoria, he spat. You think you're clean? Wait until they see your browser history. The door slammed, the threat hung in the air. Leo walked up beside me, trembling. Mom, what did he mean by browser history? I took a sip of my cold tea. My hand wasn't shaking. It means, Leo, I said, staring at the closed door, that the rat is cornered, and now he's going to try to tear the whole world down. Mom, are you listening? Leo's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We were speeding down the interstate, putting distance between us and the estate staff, alarms fading at the estate. He said, browser history. Did you search for ways to hurt him? I looked out the window at the passing skyline. My pulse was resting at a calm 60 beats per minute. Jason thinks he's playing chess, but he's still playing checkers? I replied, checking the GPS on my phone. I didn't search for anything violent or illegal on my own devices, Leo. My browser history is nothing but charity gala recipes and yoga retreats. Let him bluff. Leo exhaled, his shoulders dropping an inch. So, where are we going? To the investment, I said, pointing to the GPS dot blinking in the city center. The condo he bought with our foundation's money. Since I technically paid for it, I think it's time for an inspection. 20 minutes later, we stood in front of a sleek, modern high-rise. The concierge tried to stop us, but a quick flash of my marriage license and a threat to call the board of directors regarding facilitating missing charitable funds got us the master key card in under 60 seconds. Fear is a universal currency. We took the elevator to the penthouse on the 40th floor. The door clicked open. I expected a bachelor pad. I expected messy clothes, pizza boxes, maybe some tacky neon signs. What I found made my ice run colder than the garage. Oh my God, Leo whispered, stepping inside. The apartment wasn't a bachelor pad. It was a replica. It was a terrifying, low-budget mirror image of our living room. The same beige color palette on the walls. A sofa that looked almost identical to my custom Italian sectional but cheaper. The same layout of vases on the mantelpiece. I walked into the bedroom. The closet door was open. Hanging there were rows of pastel cardigans and floral dresses, styles that I had worn 5 years ago. Jessica wasn't just sleeping with my husband, She was auditioning for my role. She was studying me, copying me, waiting to step into my skin the moment I was removed. "This is sick," Leo said, picking up a bottle of perfume from the vanity. It was my signature scent. "She wanted to be you." "No," I said, walking over to a desk pushed against the far wall. A laptop sat humming in sleep mode. "She wanted what I have. There's a difference." I sat down at the desk. I guessed the password on the first try, Victoria 0. Jason always did lack imagination. The screen flared to life. I didn't care about their love letters. I went straight to the folders. And there it was, hidden under a directory named Tax Docs 2024. A file named The Incompetency Strategy. I clicked it open. My breath hitched. It was a timeline. Phase 1, wear her down. Phase 2, paranoia. Move objects, deny doing it. Phase 3, keep her foggy. Phase 4, power of attorney. I read the dates. They had been planning this for 6 months. The mind games, the small arguments, the times I thought I was losing my keys or forgetting conversations, it wasn't menopause. It was a script. Jason wasn't just cheating, he was plotting to have me declared mentally unfit so he could seize the entire trust fund without a divorce. "Mom?" Leo was looking at me, terrified by the silence. "What is it?" I pulled a flash drive from my purse, I never travel without one, and began copying the files. "We thought we were fighting a cheater, Leo," I said, watching the progress bar load. "But we're fighting a predator." Suddenly, the laptop camera light blinked green. I froze. On the screen, a window popped up. It was a live feed, but it wasn't a feed from the laptop. It was a feed to the laptop. I saw a wide-angle view of my own kitchen back at the estate. I saw the estate staff still milling about. I saw the lawyer, Arthur, talking on his phone. Jason had bugged our house. He had cameras in the kitchen, the living room, even the master bedroom. That's how he knew about my browser history threat. He had been watching me every second of every day. But as I stared at the screen, a slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. "Leo," I said, unplugging the flash drive. "Do you know the best thing about surveillance cameras?" "What?" "They don't take sides." I stood up, slipping the drive into my pocket. Jason recorded me, yes, but he also recorded himself. Every conversation, every plan, every stolen dollar discussed in the safety of his own home. He didn't just bug my house, he bugged his own paper trail. I grabbed my coat. "Come on, we need to get to the server room in the basement of the estate before Arthur figures out why I'm smiling." The tires of my SUV screeched against the asphalt of the estate driveway. I didn't park. I abandoned the car right in front of the fountain, leaving the driver's side door open. "Leo, check the perimeter," I ordered, tossing him the keys. "If the estate staff come back, stall them. I need 3 minutes." I kicked off my heels and ran barefoot across the gravel toward the side entrance. The pain of the sharp stones was grounding. It fueled me. I knew exactly where Arthur Pendleton would be. He wasn't in the study. He wasn't in the living room. He would be in the basement, in the climate-controlled server room that housed the brain of our smart home system. I burst through the service door and flew down the stairs. The air grew colder with every step. The hum of cooling fans grew louder, and there he was. Arthur, Jason's slimy lawyer, was hunched over the main console. His fingers were flying across the keyboard, bathed in the blue light of the monitors. A progress bar on the main screen read, "System Purge. 85% complete." "Don't hit enter, Arthur," I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. Arthur jumped, spinning around. He looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar if the child was a 50-year-old man in a $3,000 suit. "Mrs. Vance," he stammered, adjusting his glasses. I was just securing the client's data, standard procedure during a private dispute to prevent leaks." This was no longer just betrayal. It was a coordinated cover-up. Arthur regained his composure. He stepped in front of the keyboard, blocking my path. "This is my client's property, Victoria. You have no authority here. The no-contact request is for physical distance, not digital erasure." I cut him off. I pulled the prepaid phone from my pocket, the one I hadn't destroyed yet. "You see, Arthur, while you were busy driving over here, I accessed the cloud backup from the car. I didn't download everything, just the audio from last Tuesday. The night you and Jason sat in my library and discussed how to falsify Dr. Sterling's medical statement to have me declared unfit." Arthur's face went the color of curdled milk. I tapped the screen. Jason's voice, clear as day, filled the room. Can we buy influence? Or pressure a doctor to sign off on a diagnosis? Then Arthur's voice. The doctor is safer, less paper trail. We can frame it as early onset, a made-up health claim. 95%. The purge was almost done. That would be enough. The state licensing board and the foundation's independent ethics council would move fast. Arthur would lose his license. Jason would lose everything. Arthur's eyes darted from me to the screen. Or, he whispered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Or, I smiled, you cancel the wipe. You walk out of here, you tell Jason the system was locked, and when the estate staff come for him, you testify that you were misled by a manipulative client. 98%. The silence was deafening. The only sound was the whirring of the hard drives. Arthur looked at the progress bar. He looked at the phone in my hand. He was a survivor. He knew Jason was a sinking ship and I was the iceberg. His finger hovered over the S key. Click. System purge cancelled. Arthur exhaled, a long, shaky breath. He picked up his briefcase. I was never here, Victoria. Good choice. I stepped aside to let him pass. As Arthur scurried up the stairs like a rat fleeing a flood, I sat down at the console. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I had won the battle, but I had to win the war. I opened the video archives. I bypassed the recent footage and went back to the timestamps corresponding to the incompetency strategy file I found in the condo. I watched Jason messing with my tea to keep me off balance and second-guessing myself. I watched Jessica sneaking in while I was at yoga, moving my jewelry to make me think I'd lost it. I watched them laughing on my sofa, mocking my so-called decline. It was all there. Every Mind Games moment recorded in 4K resolution. But then, I saw something that made me pause. I scrolled to a file from just an hour ago, while the estate staff were calling in Jason. The camera in the guest house where Jason had been dragged was active. Jason wasn't crying. He wasn't calling a lawyer. He was on a prepaid phone of his own. He was pacing, yanking at his pant leg, his face twisted into a look I had never seen before. Not fear. Hatred. I turned up the volume. Plan A failed, Jason hissed into the phone. She knows too much. Initiate the all-or-nothing protocol. Call the insurance company and get it done. I froze. All or nothing. Leo, I screamed, grabbing the backup drive and sprinting for the stairs. Leo, get out of the house! Late that afternoon, the air felt wrong before I even reached the courtyard. Leo, the guest house, I shouted, pointing. The guest house was already in chaos. An alarm was shrieking, lights were flickering, and a gray haze drifted out into the twilight. This wasn't an accident. It was staged. Leo took one step forward on instinct. I grabbed his sleeve. Stop. Look. Down the drive, service vehicles were already turning in, too fast and too coordinated for something that had just started. He called them before it began, I said, my voice flat. Then the guest house door swung open and Jason stumbled out, smudged and coughing, clutching his chest like a man rehearsing for a courtroom. He collapsed on the lawn at the exact second the first responders spilled through the gate. Help, he rasped, loud enough for every phone camera. She tried to trap me in there. I stood on the porch as the setup snapped into focus. Motive, accusation, spectacle. A news van rolled in behind the service trucks. Of course, he wanted the world to watch. Ma'am, stay right there, a staffer called, moving toward me as the crowd surged. Leo stepped in front of me. She was inside with me. Jason kept pointing while the medical team checked him. I saw her near the guest house right before it started, he insisted. She said if she couldn't have the house, no one could. It was a compelling lie. It leveraged the angry ex-wife trope perfectly. I looked at the chaos. Responders moving, water spraying, people shouting, phones raised. Leo was shaking, but I felt a strange calm. Jason had made one critical mistake. He assumed the guest house was outside my systems. It wasn't. I didn't raise my hands. I raised the small black drive from my server cabinet. Sir, I said to the lead representative, using the tone I saved for boardrooms. Before you decide I'm the problem, you need to see what our security system recorded. Jason's performance faltered. He pushed himself upright, suddenly very alert. The footage shows Jason staging this scene, I continued. It shows when he entered, when the alarm started, and when he made his call for help. The timeline doesn't match his story. I placed the drive in the representative's palm. Please review it. I said, and ask him why he looks so prepared for a crisis he claims was a surprise. The representative looked from the drive to Jason. Check it, he told his partner. Then to Jason. Sir, stay right here. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it. The medical team hovered nearby, but his eyes were locked on me. I watched as the situation was brought under control, leaving the guest house damaged and the crowd buzzing. He tried to make you the headline, Leo whispered. Yes, I said. And he forgot one thing. This house keeps records. His all-or-nothing plan had failed, but he was still free. And a man who just lost the story is unpredictable. Leo, I said, pack a bag, we're not staying here tonight. Why, we won. No, I said, we survived, now comes the paperwork. Leo, I said, turning back to the main house, go pack a bag, we aren't staying here tonight. Why, we won. The audit findings on the missing charity funds go public tomorrow. The next morning, the boardroom of the VANCE Foundation was a fortress of glass and steel, floating 40 stories above the city. At 9 a.m. sharp, the 12 board members sat around the mahogany table, murmuring nervously. They had seen the news. The incident at the estate was trending on Twitter. At 9:05 a.m., Jason walked in. He was a disaster management miracle. Despite the incident review and the angry rash that still covered him, he was dressed in a fresh suit, his face caked in makeup to hide the stress. He walked with a limp, but his eyes were manic. Gentlemen, Jason announced, taking the seat at the head of the table. I apologize for the tabloid noise. My wife, she is unwell. The incident was a tragic accident caused by her instability. We are handling it privately. He was good. He was selling the narrative of the suffering husband perfectly. We are voting today to remove Victoria from the board due to mental incapacitation, Jason continued, pushing a stack of files forward. The fake medical statements he and Arthur had fabricated, it's for her own good. The board members exchanged looks. Money hates uncertainty. If getting rid of Victoria calmed the stock price, they would do it. Second the motion, Arthur Pendleton said from the corner. Objection, a voice cut through the air. The heavy double doors swung open. I didn't walk in alone. I walked in with Leo on my right and a forensic auditor on my left. I wasn't wearing my usual soft pastels. I was wearing ice red. Victoria. Jason stood up, his knuckles white on the table. You are trespassing. Security. Sit down, Jason, I said, my voice calm but amplified by the silence of the room. You don't command security anymore. I do. I plugged my laptop into the presentation port. The main screen behind Jason flickered. You told the board I was incompetent, I addressed the shareholders. You claimed I was losing my mind. But while Jason was busy mind games me, I was busy auditing the books. I clicked the remote. A spreadsheet appeared on the massive 80-inch screen. Red lines crossed out nearly every transaction from the last fiscal quarter. This is the Orphan Relief Fund, I pointed to a line item. $500,000 withdrawn. Destination, a shell company in the Caymans. Jason's face twitched. That was for international expansion. Really? I clicked again. A photo appeared. The sleek, high-rise condo. The replica apartment. Because it looks like you expanded into a penthouse for your mistress, Jessica Miller. And here is the deed, signed by you, using charity funds. The room erupted. Missing charitable funds is the one sin Wall Street doesn't forgive. Lies. She photoshopped it. Jason screamed, looking around for support. But the board members were pulling away from him. And just in case you think this is a personal vendetta, I clicked to the next slide. It was a video file, the black box footage from the server room. It played the audio of Jason and Arthur plotting. Can we buy influence? Or pressure a doctor to sign off on a diagnosis? Arthur Pendleton quietly closed his laptop, stood up and tried to slip out the side door. Victoria, the compliance team and outside auditors are already in the lobby. We are doing this by the book. Jason looked at the screen, then at the board members who were now looking at him with pure disgust. The chairman of the board, an old friend of my father, stood up. I've already signed the release to turn everything over to the independent auditors and regulators. Jason slumped into his chair. The power was gone, the money was gone, the status was gone, but I wasn't done. There's one last thing, I said, walking over to him. I placed a document on the table. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a printout of an email chain. I found this in your drafts folder, Jason. An email to Jessica, dated 2 days ago. discussing how you planned to dump her once the money was secured and blame her for the missing charitable funds. Jason's eyes widened. You hacked my private. I didn't have to hack it, I smiled. Jessica gave me your password this morning. The ice drained from his face. Cooperate with the review panel. Tell the truth. And we can resolve this without dragging everyone through months of hearings. The door swung open. 2 building security guards stepped in with an outside compliance lead carrying a thick folder stamped confidential. Jason Vance, the compliance lead said, voice even. You are being served with a removal notice. Your building access is suspended, effective immediately, pending a formal review of missing funds and falsified records. Security didn't touch him roughly. They simply took his badge, his phone, and guided him toward the hallway, like the decision had already been made. Because it had. Jason's knees threatened to buckle. His eyes locked on mine, looking for mercy. I gave him none. Breach of trust carries consequences, the chairman said quietly, and today those consequences begin. Review the contract, Jason, I said as they hauled him past me. Breach of trust carries a heavy penalty. I turned to the board. The room was silent. Now, I smoothed my red dress. Who wants to talk about the Q4 projections? My phone buzzed once on the polished conference table. It wasn't a text from Leo, it was a smart home alert. A blurry, still image loaded, a doorstep, a pair of fuzzy slippers, and a banner across the top. Snow warning. I turned the screen face down. Not my case. Not yet. But I filed it away anyway, because I already knew the rule. 3 days later, the air in a small mediation room downtown smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. It was a sharp contrast to the lavender and beeswax calm of our estate, and I found it oddly clarifying. Jason sat across the table from me in borrowed gray sweats. He couldn't stay still, fingers drifting to his collar as if his own skin had become a reminder he couldn't escape. The irritation was fading, but the humiliation remained. You look tired, Jason, I said, placing a slim leather folder on the steel counter. Cut the crap, Victoria, Jason snarled. He looked 10 years older than he had at the gala. My lawyer says you want a quick divorce. Fine, I'll sign. But I want a settlement. 10 million, cash, or I drag this out in court for 5 years. I'll tell the press you're unreliable and tried to ruin me. He still didn't get it. He still thought we were negotiating. Arthur Pendleton isn't your lawyer anymore, Jason, I said calmly. He resigned yesterday to protect his own license. Your insurer assigned you a new attorney this morning. Jason blinked, the arrogance slipping slightly. It doesn't matter. We have no prenup. This is a community property state. I get half. Half the house, half the foundation, half the cars. I opened the folder. I didn't slide it to him. I just read from it. You're right regarding the community property laws, I nodded. However, you're forgetting about community debt. I pulled out a document stamped with the bank's logo. You see, Jason, being the man of the house was very important to you. So important that 5 years ago you insisted on refinancing the estate in your name to fund your investments. Investments that turned out to be the condo for Jessica, the Porsche you bought her, and the shell company losses. Jason finally went still. So, the assets cover the debt. They have bank statements showing missing funds, hidden accounts, and signatures that don't match. I flipped the page. The foundation is suing you for misuse of funds. The bank is calling the loans. And the board has started the process to strip you of any remaining authority. Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And since I kept my inheritance in a separate trust, immune to your debts, I am the only one with liquidity. I bought the debt from the bank an hour ago. I leaned closer to the glass. I am not your wife anymore, Jason. I am your creditor, and I am foreclosing. Jason looked like he had been punched in the gut. You can't leave me with nothing. Oh, I'm not leaving you with nothing, I corrected him. I'm leaving you with the consequences. But don't worry, I have a witness to verify all your falsified signatures. I nodded toward the door behind me. Jessica walked in. She wasn't wearing the pastel cardigan anymore. She was wearing a cheap tracksuit, looking tired and scared. She refused to look at Jason. Jessica? Jason whispered, betrayed. You. She made a deal, Jason, I explained. She testifies against you for the record falsification and the attempt to set the incident, and in exchange, I don't sue her for the unauthorized use of company funds. She walks away with nothing, but she walks away free. Because I didn't want to be blamed for your mess. He told me I'd be ruined if I stayed silent. So I didn't. Jason slammed his fist against the glass. I gave you everything. I bought you that apartment. With my money, I interrupted, standing up. Which is why the apartment is being repossessed tomorrow. I buttoned my coat. The meeting was over. Jason leaned forward, voice low and desperate. My terms: sign an uncontested divorce and walk away with what's left, or I fight you in court for years. I'll turn every hearing into a spectacle. I'll make sure your name gets dragged into every headline and every audit memo. Or, I said, leaning in slightly, you sign today and keep what little dignity you have left. You don't get to threaten me with chaos anymore. Why? He whispered, tears mixing with the grime on his face. It was just an affair. No, Jason, I said, turning to leave. It was a breach of contract, and I always read the fine print. I walked out of the building to clean air and winter light. My driver was waiting. So was my future. The wait was finally gone. For me. 6 months after Jason's formal step, the garage door opened. But this time, it didn't sound like a slam. It sounded like a heavy breath being released after holding it for 30 years. The afternoon sun flooded the space, illuminating the empty spot where the vintage Mercedes SL used to sit. The investment, the motel. It was gone. I stood in the center of the clean epoxy floor, holding a check in my hand. It sold for $200,000, Leo said, walking up behind me. He looked different. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He wasn't the boy who needed saving anymore. He was the man who had helped me pull the trigger. Not bad for a car with a tainted history, I replied, looking at the check. The auction house said the story of the revenge Mercedes actually drove the price up. Apparently, rich people love a car with a scandal attached to it. What are you going to do with the money? Leo asked, leaning against the workbench, the same workbench where I had found the wrappers that started this war. I handed him the check. Take a look at the payee. Leo squinted at the line, the Phoenix Legal Defense Fund for Women. He looked up at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. You're using Dad's car money to help women pay for divorce lawyers? I thought it was poetic, I smiled. Jason always wanted his legacy to be about supporting the community. Now, he's funding the liberation of women trapped in marriages just like ours. I think he'd hate it. We both laughed. It was a genuine sound, light and free. Jason spent the first year buried in audits, hearings, and endless paperwork. His professional license was suspended. The morality clause stripped his remaining assets. The bank took the house. By the time the dust settled, he was broke, publicly disgraced, and living in a small rented room he could barely afford. Jessica had moved back to her hometown. Without the condo, the Porsche, or the promise of a trust fund, she faded into obscurity. The last I heard, she was working at a diner, wearing a hairnet instead of bunny clips. Mom, Leo said, his voice turning serious. I never apologized for bringing her here, for almost letting her take your place. Leo, I turned to him, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. You didn't know. The foundation was rotten, but we caught it before the house collapsed. That's what matters. So, Leo looked around the empty, pristine garage. What now? It's a lot of empty space. Because I realized something in that long year of noise and paperwork. I didn't want to be a woman who plots in the dark. I wanted to be a woman who builds in the light. I was thinking, I said, pulling a brochure from my pocket. I've spent 30 years polishing a sedan that I wasn't allowed to drive. I think it's time for something convertible. I tossed the brochure on the workbench. On the cover was a cherry red sports car. 2 seats. No room for passengers, no room for lies. Just an engine and the open road. You? Leo raised an eyebrow. In a convertible? Why not? I shrugged, walking toward the sunlight pouring in from the driveway. I have no husband to cook for. I have no board meetings to attend until next quarter, and I have a very excellent moisturizer. I stopped at the threshold of the garage. The air outside smelled of jasmine and fresh cut grass. No musk cologne, no vanilla perfume. Just the scent of victory. Are you coming? I asked Leo. I ordered pizza, and we need to discuss redecorating the guest house. I'm thinking, a home gym. Leo chuckled, turning off the garage lights behind us. Coming, Mom. As the heavy door rolled down for the last time, sealing away the ghosts of the past, I didn't look back. I didn't need to check the locks. I didn't need to check the cameras. The defect was removed. The contract was terminated. And for the first time in my life, the road ahead was perfectly, beautifully clear. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold, colors that felt warmer now than they ever had inside the gray walls of my marriage. I sat on the terrace, a glass of vintage Pinot Noir in my hand, watching Leo laugh into his phone by the pool. He had met someone new, someone kind, someone who didn't smell like musk and deception. For years I thought this house was my fortress, built to keep the world out. Now, with the windows open and the fresh breeze rolling in, I realized it wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a sanctuary. My grandmother used to have an old American saying, "Living well is the best revenge." Some people call it paying a debt. I call it paying the price. My phone buzzed on the patio table, breaking the silence. It wasn't a text from Leo. It was a notification from the Phoenix Legal Defense Fund, the organization I founded with the Mercedes money. New file number 204, priority review. I took a breath and did the only thing that ever truly mattered. I made the move. I tapped the email open. The attachment wasn't a VIN plate this time. It was a grainy photo from a hallway camera, time-stamped at 3 a.m., and a screenshot of a weather app predicting a blizzard. I smiled, setting my glass down. The game never changes, only the players. Different woman. Same rule. No drama, just proof. I thought I'd seen every kind of proof. Then a snow warning and a pair of fuzzy slippers showed up.